2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Appreciate everybody making it here. I'm going to take a minute or two to slow play this thing as people get onboarded to the platform. We're using something new called Crowdcast. It has quite a bit of functionality in terms of polls. You can ask questions to the side. You can chat with one another as we start getting people in here. But appreciate kind of the launch of Now Go Start and the interest level from aspiring entrepreneurs like yourselves to attend this session. I hope it's helpful for you as you consider all the things that it takes to be successful starting your own company. But we're very excited that you're spending some time to invest in yourself and hear what we have to say, and we hope that you gather some key insights as you go down this journey, especially for those that are coming through the first time. Those that have been through it before, thanks. Hopefully, we can teach you something as well. We will go ahead and launch into the presentation, so you're not seeing my big head on the screen, and you'll see the presentation here in one moment. We also have one of the other partners within Horizon 2 Labs on the call to help moderate. Tim Fulton is on, so he'll be responding. He's the one that shows up as Horizon 2 Labs as the host. So you'll be able to get some insights from him as well, and if you have questions, he'll be assembling those along the way, and maybe we'll leave a little bit of time at the very end to answer those questions. And don't feel shy in terms of filling out the poll that's out there. Tim, do you want to go ahead and shoot the screen up? Thank you. So we're going to jump right into it. I'll introduce myself here in a moment. But the key point here for this presentation is, why do most startups fail? And oftentimes the real answer behind the big scheme of things is we build stuff that nobody cares about, as one of the other partners within Horizon 2 Labs, Alex Pertel, likes to say. But there's lots of other reasons why startups fail. This is the first of 3 sessions that we'll do every Thursday for the next 3 Thursdays, kind of a lunch and learn. Again, this is free to anybody that would like to have access to it, so encourage others to attend if it's helpful to you. But the second one, we'll be going into a lot of the tools and tricks of the trade that we have in next Thursday's session, and then we'll take you through a very tactical approach to what we do to get companies off the ground and really put our thoughts down on paper, which is a business model canvas and everything that needs to be filled out through that process. And we'll use a real life experiment and information for you so that you can get a sense of how that all works. So we're going to jump into it. Let me get over to the other side of my screen and we'll dive right into it. So just to give you a little background on Horizon 2 Labs, we're a venture studio. We work with entrepreneurs. We create ideas ourselves, as well as work with corporations to really turn concepts into companies. So just wanted to give you a little premise, a little background on the team. All of us have run companies in the past, whether that was commercializing intellectual property out of Ohio State or universities, to coming up with our own ideas, to working with venture capitalists, to creating companies from scratch, advisors, investors. We've played all of those roles. We've operated lots of technology accelerators, FinTech 71, Lumos, Founders Factory. We did some stuff in smart cities across a ton of different industries. My name is Matt Armstead. I guess you call me a serial entrepreneur. I've done a lot of investing in startups. I've started quite a few, have sold quite a few. Fortunate enough to be part of the Root founding partner team for Root Insurance here in Columbus. So I've got to see little things, and I've got to see big things, and everything in between bootstrapping it with my own money or friends and family, all the way through VC and private equity and angel investors investing in companies that I've created or been a part of. So I sit on some boards and other aspects of helping companies along the way, and I'm always one to roll up my sleeves and participate with the entrepreneurs. And I have the utmost respect for those of you that are going down this journey of entrepreneurship. So enough about ourselves and the team, but you'll get to meet some of those folks along the way over the next few weeks. Coming back to why companies fail, there is a really key component to success, and that comes directly from you. And if you are not taking care of yourself, health-wise, eating-wise, getting sleep, getting some workouts in, or at least going for walks and decompressing, your health will have a major impact on whether you're successful or not. If you don't take care of yourself, it has a dramatic impact on you and your performance, and ultimately could be the detriment of the company if you aren't mentally right. There's a great amount of depression that comes with being an entrepreneur. It's a heck of a roller coaster, and you'll hear that time and time again from other entrepreneurs. The highs are really high and the lows are really low, and those can come very, very frequently. Whether you're trying to raise money or get your idea off the ground, your first customer, all of those things are amazingly difficult on you personally, and sometimes very uplifting. Being around people that really help you is utmost important. If you're hanging out with people that piss you off or make you angry, or just are a bad experience for you, that can be a detriment because they're going to weigh you down, and you have to keep your utmost enthusiasm towards your idea and your company and what you're trying to accomplish. And ultimately, all of those things have a big effect on confidence, and confidence in and of itself can be a major reason why you're successful or not. If you go in front of an investor, you go in front of a customer, a partner, an employee, and if you don't exude confidence in your idea and yourself, people read through that very quickly, and you don't get to hire the right people, and you can't find the right investors. And I've had plenty of experiences on both fronts when I'm really low and depressed, getting that confidence level in front of the right people in order to move your business forward can be really, really difficult. So take care of yourself. You can either make a big impact on why your company's successful. What you'll hear from investors is they bet on entrepreneurs, so they bet on you just as much as they idea, and sometimes more so on you because they want somebody that knows they can get through all the trials and tribulations of what it takes to be successful. Family. Great to have your family network and your spouse, brothers, sisters, family, directly or indirectly. That is extremely important. Sorry, seeing some stuff on the sides in terms of people having access to the screen. Keep a balance in your life. You can get all consumed with what's going on in your work world and lose track of what's most important. Businesses come and go, they fail all the time. And if you over-index on your relationship with your business, where it's 24/7, you don't have time, you're angry when someone wants your time, you have to have balance. That balance can be a detriment to your success. So make sure that you take care of your family, and take care of yourself, and have a balance between what you do for work and what you do for yourself and your family. Make sure you have the right level of commitment to your family. They're just as important to your success as everything else. I always like to say that we're really, really excited about the possibilities of where a company that we create goes. But my family takes a lot of personal anguish. They make a lot of sacrifices for my success. So I want you to know that that's super important. To take care of yourself and make that commitment to your family. And then lastly, finances. I mean, you can bootstrap these things, you can max out your credit cards, and those finances become pretty impactful, right? Your spouse could have to take on the brunt of the work when you're not paying yourself because you got to pay your employees first, or you got to take care of something that you have to buy for the business. You can really get devastated on the finance front. So again, take care of your family. They're going to be just as rewarded, if not impacted on a negative basis, and it can have an ultimate effect on your success or your failure. Team is probably the most difficult time of working through these startups. Founders, if you're married, it is more difficult to get out of a founder relationship than it is a marriage. You're basically wed, whether that's your investors, the people that you bring in as co-founders, that can have a big effect. So make sure you know who you're partnering with. Make sure you understand their strengths, their weaknesses, what their motivations are before you get into business with them. Give them equity, and on paper, through your operating agreement and through the structure legally, that you know who you're working with. Because when it doesn't work, it can be extremely stressful. You don't want to be in the same room. You can't talk, you can't communicate, you can't move the business forward. So those founder relationships are extremely important. In the same vein, employees are very important. You got to hire slow and fire fast is kind of the nomenclature that often is said. So spend your time. There's some tricks of the trade relative to working with contractors, maybe someone coming in part-time if it's the right fit and they're still looking for work and not quite sure that you're ready and you don't have the capital to support a full-time employee. Think of interesting ways that you can bring those employees or teammates on. The same thing with partners, right? If you pick the wrong partner to enable some of your technology or enable a portion of your business, that can be a detriment. So you got to look historically at their financials. If they're supplying product to you or services to you, really get to know who they are, because they are going to be a big part of your success or failure relative to this, your business. Jumping into your idea, you spend time validating. There's a lot of reasons why, and this goes back to the end, first slide on validation. You have to validate, and you have to validate quickly. If you take 6, 9, 12 months and you're already in operation to try to get validation for a customer segment that you're thinking about, you will fail. One of the next sessions that we have, we'll talk a lot about validation and the process of going through that and how you interview people and how you get on phone and the tricks of the trade in terms of channels, whether that be LinkedIn or social media, or just picking up the phone and talking to people or stopping into a store or speaking with people outside of a grocery store to understand what they're doing and how they're solving their current problem. But you have to do it quickly. You have to observe what they're doing, and you have to be able to measure it. So observation is a direct correlation to the activity, whether you're sitting there mirroring someone on a website and how they're using something in an app is one form of observation. It could be how people engage or go through the buying process of something. Those are observations, and that will validate or invalidate your business concept. And ultimately, you want to measure. You want to see, what people are or are not doing, and we do that in a variety of ways. We actually do it quite systematically, where we'll look at a thesis and talk about a problem and a solution, and we validate whether that is. If we put out a target that says, out of the 10 people we talk to about this, if we don't get at least 7 people that say, yes, I would use this, and there's another slide almost right after this on that topic, we don't validate it. We set a metric and a threshold that says they will use it. You don't want 3 people said it and you self-believe the fact that you think it's going to be wildly successful because 3 out of 10 told you it was going to be interesting, or your mom or your dad told you it was going to be interesting. You definitely want to spend some time on the measurement and be real with yourself in terms of validating that business concept. So what I mean and what we mean, and again, Alex is going to help me out with this on the next presentation, is real validation. So oftentimes you say, I have this great concept. What do you think of it? And I'd be like, I absolutely would definitely buy that. That's one thing, right? There is no skin in the game when someone says that. They aren't pulling out their credit card. They're not paying money for it. They're not putting their reputation on the line, and they're not spending more time and energy in terms of using it or sharing it with other people. So real validation is when they put skin in the game and there's something legitimately on the line that says they are vested in interest. There's a lot of different ways of doing that. We stand up landing pages, which are quick, simple websites, single page, or a couple pages where they go through the process that we hope to aspire to build before we build it. And they ultimately click on a button that says buy now. And that one little trigger point that we measure will tell us whether they're going to be interested or not. And if we can see a good pickup of those people that get through that experience, ultimately clicking on the buy button is true, real validation. If you talk to people as you think about the concept, say, can you introduce me to other people that might be buyers of this solution? That's where reputation and time play into this thing. If they're willing to put their credit card in to buy in advance, a lot like the crowdsource platforms that you may say, I'll build it if we get $50,000 fundraise for these particular products, that is also some form of real validation for what you're trying to build. So use those tools. Don't just say and do it and build it and invest friends and family time and money into what you're trying to get off the ground by someone saying, I would definitely buy that, because words are only worth so much. Sales, the unfortunate thing with being an entrepreneur is you have to wear every single hat. I remember my first company, we sold it to a group out of Denver. It was called Mobile Wait. It would text people when their table's ready. That was one of my first technology ventures. I did a bunch of stuff in the startup space during the .com era. But they, right after the recession in 2008, we started a company. Much like what's going on right now, it's a great time to start a company when you have nothing else to lose, to be quite honest. There's a lot of innovation that comes from necessity. But I remember being acquired. I remember sitting down with the organization that acquired us, and the table was full of various people, from HR to accounting to operations to finance to you name it, the CTO and others of the companies that bought us. And I, fortunately, being an entrepreneur that was very frugal and bootstrapping the company that we sold, had to play the role of every single one of those people in the room. So I understood where they came from. They would ask how a contract gets done. I had the answer. How we price this, how we negotiate the contracts, all of those things from legal all the way through HR. I had to know those things. So there's a direct benefit to being a solopreneur or an entrepreneur who has to figure out all these things. And one of the most important is distribution or sales. And that comes from your ability to sell directly to the buyer of your product or service. And that is one form of distribution or sales. Always be closing in the background there with Alec Baldwin. But there's also other forms of ways to distribute your product or get sales, and channels are another one. I'm a big believer in. If you look at some of the biggest and best companies, they use channels to sell their products. IBM makes 30% of their revenue based on channel partnerships that sell or create other solutions on top of theirs in order to sell a bigger solution. And so think about that. And then there's uncommon partners. I remember going back to that Mobile Wait example, that I did a partnership with Cisco, which is the food service delivery folks, right? They do anything with technology, but they're in restaurants all the time. And if they had 80 salespeople in Columbus, I might be able to get 10% of them. So 8 people who love to talk about new innovative things outside of just the products that they get delivered to their back door for kitchen needs and serving people, to-go boxes, things like that. That they would actually go help be an uncommon partner to me in the distribution side of my products and services. So distribution is important. You always have to be selling. You have to be the visionary and the chief sales officer and the evangelist of your product and business. And you've got to figure out how to sell. You can't avoid it as an entrepreneur. You have to always be doing it, whether you're selling to partners, employees, investors, customers, you name it. You always have to be thinking about how is my product going to make money, and I have to personally take control of that and do the best I can to keep things moving and generate revenue. So I've done a lot of little things. I've done some big things. There's nothing that I've learned more than when I worked with Drive Capital in the early phases of what eventually became Root Insurance. And Alex and Dan have created such an amazing company. I'm very fortunate to even be associated to it. But in working with Drive, really, really big ideas. And I'll talk about types of investors and types of pitching in a few more slides in. But the idea is so important. And you have to understand the size of that opportunity. Is it going to be a $10 million company? Can it make a few $100,000? Can it make tens of thousands of dollars? Or is this, as they call it in the technology space, a unicorn? Something so unique that's $1 billion idea and will make or break a market. You have to think about your problem, the problem that you're trying to solve, and the solution that solves it, and how unique that is. That moat that you create is going to be very difficult for any other competitor to compete against you, as well as how much resources you can put into it and how big of a market it is that you're trying to solve for. So as an investor, as someone that looks at building companies, This is critical. And if you don't have the right idea and you have a really difficult time with creating something of size and magnitude and solving real problems with a real solution, it can ultimately define whether you're going to be successful or a failure. And I have no problem with failure as long as you learn from it and you take that. And I think it's quite honestly a badge of honor where some people don't want to associate with you, but they're not sophisticated investors that really realize, especially if you're a smart entrepreneur, that failure only defines you further and drives you further. So if you have that mentality, you're probably right for this type of job, being an entrepreneur. Otherwise, you might be struggling here if you can't adapt to an ever-changing world and go after really big things. And again, I don't want to, if you're trying to create a services-based company and it's just going to be yourself, that's great. If you're going after a huge idea and a really big problem, that's another thing. Another example here in town, actually in Columbus, is Cover My Meds. And if you hear the backstory with the Scantlins, they were a service provider. And they found this area that we really needed desperate help, and it was a huge problem. And they converted their entire company into a software technology company that became Cover My Meds and had their $1 billion exit. So things can start small. And as you evolve and learn, they can become really, really big ideas. But always keep these problem solution size and how that relates to your audiences that you're going to engage with. And I'll share more of that in a little bit. Another thing, especially for those of you that are trying to build a team, vision is critical. I always get self-conscious about it because I'm playing it through my head all the time. Who are we? What are we going to be? How big are we going to be? Where are we going to head? And I feel like I'm answering that question all the time. But if I don't share that with my team, they can get lost. They don't have the direction that they need in order to achieve the goals that you aspire to win with, right? And that vision might be a 10-year vision. So it's critical that you share that weekly, monthly, quarterly, your stand-ups, refreshing their memory on that. And so your team has to be aligned to the vision. Otherwise, you'll see sporadic involvement or misalignment in meeting objectives or misalignment in the product roadmap or the way that you deliver the solution or how you want to tell that story to a potential customer. And you want everybody else to be alongside of that, not just your team, but you want everyone to look at you and say, I totally get where they're going. I love that vision. I want to be part of that, whether that's an internal thing, person, or an external person. And you want them to understand the journey and how to get there. And sometimes your employees and your confidants and partners, investors are part of that journey, and they're part of who shares that story and that vision. And so if you do a really great job of crystallizing that vision, we'll talk about MTP here at the end, massive transformative purpose, it will drive your business in a way that you would never understand otherwise. But you have to simplify it, and you have to distill it down to something that most people would understand and be very excited about it. The way you deliver that message is critical. So can't say enough about vision. Again, if you don't share it in the right way and be consistent with it and keep reinforcing it, it can be the demise of your business, or it can be part of why you're so successful. Funding, I get tons of questions about funding. Everybody's, oh, if I just had the money, I would be wildly successful. And that's not always true. You can, get money from family and friends that don't add strategic value. Or they don't understand your business and they take you in wildly weird directions. But even more importantly is when you do seek that funding, it's so important to know your audience and who you're talking to, right? I get blind emails all the time on LinkedIn or messages and, hey, I'm doing this and it's a biotech company. I don't invest in, I don't know anything about biotech. I don't know much about healthcare. Those are not areas I spend a lot of time in. So hitting me up on that is not going to make a lot of sense. And I'm also an investor in the way that I think about it. When I wear my entrepreneur hat, I think one way. When I am an investor, I think another way. But I look at the business and saying, okay, is this a lifestyle business? This is going to make $200,000 or $300,000 a year. It's not going to be able to kick off dividends. It has a fairly high expense. They don't understand their unit economics, but lifestyle-wise, somebody that's running that business could make $100,000 but be zero return for investors. So you got to know when you're pitching a lifestyle business that what's in it for the investor. I use the baseball analogy when I look at it as an angel investor. Is this going to be a base hit, right? Can this potentially make high six figures, maybe close to seven figures? Should I invest? What do I think is the multiple on the exit? And I'm using a lot of terms that some of you may or may not know, but eventually it's the liquidity of the business and what someone is willing to pay for it based on what they think the value is over the next few years. A double is great. I might make 3-4x on my money. And then a grand slam, I think, is, just a massive windfall for everybody involved, including the founders. And those are typically angel investors or smaller VCs that might look for those singles and doubles. And they're happy with those things. The moonshots are the big market defining opportunities like a Root Insurance, like a Beam Dental. People who are making an entire market opportunity grow and scale and be extremely big for a lot of people. And VCs, especially tier one VCs like a Drive Capital, or if you go out west to Sequoia and others, Lightspeed, things like that, they're looking for the moonshots. They're not investing in anyone other than the very best of the best market defining player in that space. So it's just super important as you think about funding. Who is your audience depending on the type of company you're trying to build? If you're building a unicorn, you're a moonshot. You're going after tier one VCs, and you need tens of millions of dollars, not only in the first round, but in the series B, C, D, and the way that you think about fundraising. Baseball, relative in terms, singles, doubles, you're talking about angel investors or smaller VCs where they might make a $500,000 bet, $1 million bet. Again, I'm not being relevant for everybody on this call, but hopefully you can internalize this to your own situation and the type of business that you're trying to build. And then lifestyle, think about bootstrapping it. Think about taking out loans, especially if you believe in the business. Really hard to have investors and meet expectations around the returns that they're looking for if you're in that mode. And I've certainly had companies that have gone down and look like a baseball analogy route, ends up being a lifestyle business. They buy out the investors. They get a little bit of a return, interest, maybe a multiple, small multiple, and they get their money back at least. And that group of people go off and build great businesses that just chose not to continue to raise money and go down that ride that is continuously trying to raise money in many technology companies. So the EduSources of Columbus, the Accepteds in the world have kind of been down that baseball route and chose to go down to a path where they're quite profitable, can employ people, but decided not to continue down that venture route or that investable route. Another thing, especially as we've run accelerators, pitching is a really big deal. We look for great storytellers, people who really tell an amazing story, a reason why they decided to get into it and how they're solving that problem. That's key. Storytelling, I can't tell you how important it is. And so going back to the investor route on the alignment side, if you're telling a small story to a big VC, you're telling the wrong story. And you have to align to it. You got to know your audience. And I always do research on LinkedIn. If I'm going in to have a conversation with someone, I'm Googling them, I'm LinkedIn. I want to know what their background is. I want to know where their interest level is, where they've had success in the past. There's great alignment for me in terms of where that potential partnership could come into play. But it also helps me understand the type of story and how I need to shape that story. And that's key. The other thing I'll say about timing relative to pitching is, when a VC raises their first round early on, they want deal flow. They want to be able to tell their limited partners, their LPs, the people who invest in their fund, that they have great deals ready to invest in. And if you can get on that front end piece and be early in some of their storytelling to the public of who they just invested in and the market opportunities that they're trying to start defining as a venture capitalist, timing is critical in terms of when your entry point is to those groups. If they're on their first fund, you don't see them raising a second fund, and it's on the tail end, they may not have the capital. They may be reserving that money to invest in their current portfolio where they aren't investing in new companies. And so your timing, you might be wasting your time with a potential investor if you're not getting the timing right in terms of where they're at. Like I've had plenty of conversations with VCs like, hey, I love your idea. We're going to try to raise a fund at the end of the year, our next round, but we're not investing right now. So, good to know that up front. And it's okay to ask prior to setting up your meeting and your time, because it's your time is just as important as their time. And there's a whole nuance to how you position yourself and how busy you are. And you want to focus on growing your business, and pitching can be a significant burden on your time. As CEO of several startups, there were times where that was 100% of my job, and I wasn't focused on product roadmaps and vision and partnerships and hiring the right employees. I was nonstop raising capital to get us through the next hurdles and the next tranche of what we needed to accomplish as a business and the major milestones associated to it. So can't say enough about pitching. Enthusiasm is so important. Imagine two people in the room, both pitching the same idea. One has no energy whatsoever. They have zero confidence. They're hurting, and they share how much they're hurting, versus someone that's super energetic, super confident, telling a great story. Who are you going to invest in? So that's a big part of that pitching and that capability. Persistence, man, this is the end all be all for startups and entrepreneurs. You have to be relentless. I'll talk a little bit about passion, and it very much coincides with persistence. You have to be relentless about what you're trying to do. You will run through brick walls all the time, and as soon as you get through one, another one's waiting for you. And you're hitting your head against the wall all the time, but you have to be relentless. You have to be constantly thinking about what's next. You got to maintain a positive attitude, like, hey, great, no problem. Thanks for the no, moving on, right? Rather than soaking and dwelling on a negative experience, take it as a positive and turn it around and be relentless on how you're going to make improvements. What can I learn from what I just went through to be better, to improve my product roadmap, to improve my service, to change my story? And that leads into curiosity. And what I've seen from some of the best entrepreneurs is they're always curious. They're always asking tons of questions. They want to see what's next and how it's possible and how other people do their business models or how they think about business. And experimentation is all part of that process. I'll give you another example in terms of learning and relentlessness. And there was a startup that assumed that they had to have all the money in hand. They had to have technology in place before they could ever get their business off the ground. And in this particular case, it was someone that wanted to deliver, very enthusiastic, very successful in what they were previously doing, and wanted to go do something new and different, completely outside of what they went to college and for. And they wanted to do organic salads delivered to office buildings, and thought they had to have the online ordering and a new brand and had to do some customized stuff, and needed $100,000 to get that. And my point was, go walk in without any technology, a piece of paper, and go to the person that takes care of lunches for the executives or for their events, and get them to fill out an order form and see if you can get some regularity out of those orders, and see what they want to buy and what they like off of your menu and what they would change about their menu, and get an order and take a check and make the salads at home. And then once you learn about it and you perfect what that minimal viable product is, we'll talk about MVPs a lot over the next 3 weeks. It will be tremendously helpful for you to go through that experience. But you have to have that persistence and relentlessness and that curiosity and experimentation in order to be successful. And it doesn't take a lot of money. As much as you think you want to be a technology company, and you can be and you should be if that's where you want to go, but you can learn from very manual process and very hand-to-hand combat, guerrilla marketing. All of those things can play extremely well, whether you're looking at a technology company or your everyday business. And I think what we're in the world we're living in right now, especially for people who came from the restaurant or hospitality industry, it's an ever-changing game at this point. And I think you have to be willing to experiment. I mean, you can't live without curbside or delivery in some capacity. I have a good friend that owns quite a few franchise locations for Great American Cookies. A big part of his distribution model, he's in malls, right? No malls were open forever. He was out selling to hospitals and other groups that, get deliveries. He was putting things on Facebook on how people can order these cookies for, birthday cakes instead of doing birthday cakes. So it takes a lot of hustle as part of that experimentation and persistence to be successful. But if you don't, and you rest on your laurels, and you don't look for persistence and constantly evolving your business, you will fail. So if you don't go in with the right attitude, and you don't know if you think that you can just rest on a simple idea and evolve it, I have not seen a lot of success from that. Most of the entrepreneurs that I see that are wildly successful are constantly changing, being curious, persistent no matter what. Even with failure, they're constantly changing the way that they play the game. Another thing that, going back to the validation, hand-to-hand combat, having conversations, doing interviews, all of that's very important. But once you're in market, you need to look at the data. And if you're an online or a website, hook up Google Analytics. If you're an app, you look at various metrics that are going on in terms of waterfall effects of people who log in, or people who download to register, to log in, the frequency of their logging in. We look at all those things on the data front that constantly make tweaks to the user experience. But why I say all of this is that, I've certainly come up with, at times, with ideas, and we've launched the companies, and we've gotten strong validation, and we've looked at the data, and we've built this great feature inside of the technology that everybody said they wanted. And then when we look at the data, they aren't using that functionality. We spent a lot of money to create it, even though they said that they were going to use it. They really don't. So how do you change behavior? What do you need to do in order to change that behavior? And then when do you make those choices to pivot or change the way that you work is super critical to your success. So I don't care how sophisticated your business is, or technology driven it is, or how manual it is. You've got to find ways to have key performance indicators, KPIs. You have to have milestones. You have to have deliverables. There's got to be things that you're setting very specific data on. Are we achieving the goal on this date? Is the data telling us that we're successful? Are people using it the way that we thought they were going to use it? So you've got to find your own dashboard that helps you look at the data to decide whether you're being successful or not. If that's sales data, POS data, point of sale, that's what it is. If it's the amount of revenue, the renewals of contracts, all of those things are super important. If it's operational and you're a consulting business, look at the data. Can you be profitable? Can you hire more people, even if they're contractors? Are you getting the margins that you need in order to be successful and thrive and scale and grow? So data is very important. You've got to find how that works inside of your environment. You can do it on an Excel spreadsheet. There's online tools if you're an online company in order to facilitate how you capture data and how you analyze it. Coming back, and I referenced this a little bit ago on the passion front. Passion is critical. I've seen so many people get burned out starting their own company because it is so grueling in terms of the level of effort and energy and all of those things that you have to love it. The like and tolerate will not help you be successful in the test of time. So you've got to find a way. You've got to look at this. You've got to internalize it, and you got to look deep inside yourself. Am I really passionate about this? Am I really solving a problem, or is this just how I make money? Because when we look at ventures, we know these things aren't typically 1 or 2 or 3 years. These are 7 to 10 years before we see success, before we see liquidity, before we see our investment really come and become fruitful in the big scheme of things. And that's a return on your time. That's a return on your investment. That is a return on your relationships that are ultimately being sacrificed because of the level of effort it takes in order for these companies to be successful. So I love this image. It really is about passion. Here's a guy with his camera on fire, his feet are on fire, and he just wants that one shot. And if you can internalize that image in yourself and your idea and say, that's me. When my feet are on fire, I'm standing there because I love it so much. You have an opportunity of being wildly successful. But you also, going back to the last slide on the data side, you have to listen to the data, and you may have to relent to the data and say, as much as this was my passion, it isn't something that's going to be successful, or it's not going to do that test of time scenario. So I'll give you an example for me personally. Several years back, I fell in love with that idea, and I thought the entrepreneur was great. It was a designer out of Ohio State, Sarah Bush. We created a company called Sprout It that would help people grow their own gardens, right? They can grow their own fruits, vegetables, from seedling all the way from a starter plant, and it helps them along. And as much as I was passionate about it, I was really into health mode, no GMOs, eating organic, all of those things. And I was like, wow, this can really change people's lives. And I want to be a part of that. And I was passionate about it. And I would tell the story about what we were trying to do, and people were like, oh, I would totally buy that. But what I didn't anticipate was looking at the data that when, no fault of their own as a gardener, plants die, droughts, don't water enough, the deer come by and chew it, whatever, we would have massive drop off in our user base, and they wouldn't restart new gardens. And so when people are looking at investable businesses, they wanted to see, what's your monthly active users? How many people are coming back every month? How are they using it? And when you saw a massive drop off, I had to look at the data. As passionate as I was about the opportunity and the idea and the company and the people, and we got great accolades and amazing things that were telling us this is it, and you're doing the right thing, and what you're building is helping a lot of people. The data was telling us it wasn't a company that I could scale, I could raise capital on, and I had to realize that, as much as I am passionate about it. So now that's moved to hobby versus a career and a startup that I was investing my time and energy and money into. So one example for you to kind of internalize as you think about starting your own company. But you can't be in the camp of like and tolerate. You have to be in love with your idea, and that will help you through the hard times. So I hope you take that to heart. And if it's a like a tolerate moment, it could evolve to the failure side of this discussion versus the success side of this discussion. So I'm going to get a little bit tactical. A lot of people think about like mission statements and vision statements, and those are just, okay. So there's a book out there, Start With Why. Simon Sinek wrote it. And in that book, a key component of it is MTP, which is massive transformative purpose. And this is the higher aspirational purpose of an organization. And you can Google this, and there's examples of how Google uses it, and really big companies have distilled down what their vision is in just a few simple words. It's not a paragraph. It's not a single page. It is literally 2, 3, 4, 5 words that summarize what they're trying to do. And both internally, people can put their arms around this and say, I want to be part of that company. I know they're transforming the world. I want to be associated to it. I want to buy that product. So just as much as it motivates internally and helps you on that vision side that I was talking about earlier, it helps on the outside too, on people wanting to be associated to it in the way that you yourself are changing the world. I love the comment Steve Jobs made in terms of making a dent in the universe, and I wholeheartedly believe that. And that can be a little dent, or it can be a massive dent. And I think if you're passionate about it and you can turn what you want to build into and leverage this MTP methodology, it will help you sell your vision to a lot of people and motivate them to want to help you be successful. So I encourage you to go out there. There's another book called Exponential Organizations by Salim Ismail. Lots of videos on YouTube talking about exponential organizations, as well as Simon Sinek's on there. You can see him in TED Talks and a whole bunch of other things. But that massive transformative purpose is a great tool for you to kind of synthesize your big vision into just a few concise words that motivates a lot of people. The other side of this over on Salim's side is the scale and ideas. And so if you think about some of the best companies in the world, they have adopted this methodology and use several of these attributes in order to scale their business. And I'm only going to go through a few of these. But for example, staff on demand. If you think about Uber, they didn't hire a bunch of drivers. Same way from a leveraged assets perspective, they didn't go out and buy a bunch of cars. They're leveraging the masses, the community, in order to scale their business. And it's a completely different line of thinking than being a taxi cab company. So that is an attribute of that company. There's companies certainly like General Electric or Coca-Cola, other companies that use this same methodology and why they've been so wildly successful. But that's a big thing. If you think about Amazon and what AWS has done for online companies, they didn't, what used to be back in the .com era is I needed to set up my own farm of servers and I needed to host it myself. And now you have AWS where you can, again, staff on demand or leveraged assets. You're leveraging somebody else's assets in order to scale your business very rapidly and scale extremely powerfully. There's a cool company called Kaggle. What they do is deliver data science from a community and crowd perspective. So basically, someone like Allstate could go out and say, we're trying to build a new underwriting algorithm to solve an insurance claims process, put that as a competition out on the Kaggle platform, and have a bunch of data scientists all over the world, the best and brightest that either do or don't have expertise in that space, and try to solve that problem creatively. And the winner makes, $100,000 or $1 million, depending on how big of a company or how small of a company you are in terms of the prize that you could put in front of them. Sometimes that community just wants something really interesting and exciting to be associated with and solve a big problem. But that's that community and crowd that's solving that. I didn't have to hire 60 data scientists and engineers in order to solve that problem. I put it out to the crowd to help me solve that problem. So on the scale side, those are some great examples. The ideas side is like dashboards, keeping track of things very intuitively relative to the data that you're collecting so that you can understand it. Experimentation is so important. People who figure out how to do it quick and smart and validate quickly are going to win. Those that go through, and I've dealt with this for big companies for many years, is they talk about it in 1 year, they plan for it in another year, and the next year they start thinking about how they actually implement it and put budget towards it and then align resources associated to it. And all through that time, there's politics and stakeholders that do or don't want you to be successful with that idea. We live in a world, the reason why we're called Horizon 2 Labs is we live in that adjacent possible, which is about 3 to 5 years out. It's something new that might be touching existing lines of business, but we don't want to be encumbered by that. And we like to think of it as a joint venture or external innovation so that we're not encumbered by legacy applications, legacy branding, legacy capabilities. We want to start fresh and new, maybe leveraging existing IP or intelligence and know-how and industry expertise. But to have that fresh slate to start new and do it right without any of the legacy issues can be wildly helpful and successful for a company. So autonomy, you're going to hear a ton about. If you can automate certain functions in the technology world, straight through processing, robotic process automation, those are all terms that you're going to hear a lot in that world. And that helps automate a lot of things that manually was required prior. Someone looking at it, someone moving it through a workflow, forwarding on, getting approvals. And a lot of things nowadays are being automated, and you have to fully embrace that in order to be an exponential organization. So I do encourage you to think about these and how they may apply to your business and what you're trying to create. And hopefully these are a good starting point and some referenceable points for you. I'll give you another example just on the community and crowd, the Reddits and the Tumblrs. They're not the ones creating all the content. It's all the users in the community that are helping scale that up so other people can share it, other people can learn from it, and creates a community effect. But they didn't have to hire tens of thousands of people or millions of people in order to create the content. The beneficiaries, and there's an equitable exchange between the user and the company and everybody in between in that ecosystem to make it successful and why it hums. So think about business models. I love, and that's why we love running accelerators and helping startups and investing in them, because we're constantly learning from what they're doing, and they might sell something different or price something different or deliver it differently. And we get really excited about that, and we constantly learn. And so there's that equitable exchange between, us as advisors and mentors and investors to the entrepreneurs who are running those companies themselves. So I'm going to close out here with some of my advice. Embrace those exponentials that I just went through. Have a sense of urgency. Don't be like, I'm going to put that off next week, or I'll address that next month, relative to how that's going to affect your business, because that can be the death of you if you don't have that sense of urgency. It's one of the things that I think entrepreneurs and startups have a significant advantage to big companies, is they don't have the same level and sense of urgency. Our rewards, our successes, our ability to compete are based on those sense of urgencies, our agility, our ability to move and pivot and constantly change the way we evolve ourselves, where the big companies have very different motivations and incentives, right? I just want my quarterly bonus. I just want to keep my job. I want to raise the bar in terms of being a manager to a director. In the entrepreneurial world, it's very different. Your incentives are, can I build value in the company that I own or own a portion of that sees my return on investment seeing a big return at the end? I think generational wealth comes from entrepreneurship. It doesn't come from employment. So I'm a big believer in entrepreneurship, especially as it helps people be financially successful. And it may not feel that way, especially when you're not paying yourself and paychecks aren't coming in, but you are investing in yourself. Just a couple other points. Be scrappy, bootstrapping things, asking for help, be externally focused. Don't always be internally focused. Get yourself out there, get in front of people who buy your product. Balance fear with optimism. It's scary to do these types of things, but you have to be optimistic. And I think that really helps you be successful. Certainly a driver for me is a commitment to positive impact to the people I work with, to the entrepreneurs that I'm associated with, to the community I live in. It helps drive me, and it's a balancing effect for me in terms of how I look at why I'm doing what I'm doing, and keeping myself motivated and encouraged, because sometimes you're on an island all by yourself, because people don't realize and understand, they're not in your shoes, what you're going through. So reflecting back on those things that are your motivation and why you're doing it, not just about the product, but other attributes that make you successful, can be very, very helpful. So, I don't want to take too much time. I appreciate everybody. I really do. You can always email us questions at info@horizon2labs.com. Big believer in taking care of each other. That's why we're doing this. If you have more questions, or want to refer others to get some information from this, you can go to nowgostart.com, and we'll have this video available to you as we move forward, so you can share the content with others and freely. So Tim's on the other line. He's muted at the moment, but Tim, I didn't know if there was any questions or anything that I can hit up on.
Yeah, here I am. Two I flagged. There's a couple of them that we're going to really be addressing in other sessions, so I would encourage folks to come along to those. We will automatically register you for them. One that got some feedback from others, they said, following up on the confidence advice, this was towards the beginning of the presentation, Matt, can you give some advice on how one might overcome imposter syndrome? The feeling that many really smart and talented people experience when they lean in with something new like this.
Whew, it's hard. I will say in my first couple of ventures, I struggled with confidence. There's no question about it. My wife would call me out on it. My friends would call me out on it. And it took experience. It took the experimentation, I think might be one word, to go out and have conversations with people and feel confident enough to bring it up. A lot of people are not confident in sharing their idea. They think somebody's going to steal it. They want to sign an NDA. Should I get them to sign the NDA? And I'm like, no, man, if they're smart enough to go scale and steal your idea, have at it. There's something unique about you. You got to be comfortable with who you're sharing it with and why you're sharing it. But I think it's helpful in that regard to just have those conversations and be willing to have someone give you feedback that's not what you want to hear, that's somewhat negative. And that builds up. So confidence has come for me from having conversations with people I don't know, with sharing my story and my ideas openly, surrounding myself with really positive people. All of those have fueled confidence. I don't have a silver bullet for you on the confidence side of things. I think self-help, I think watching inspiring videos. I think confidence is pulled from many different directions, and I think various people are able to achieve that in a variety of ways. But it's hard, especially when you're getting beat up and you're having a tough day. To continue to exude confidence is really, really difficult. But I think it comes from being happy with yourself, happy with your life, and being content. For the longest time, I was not. And I think the more you can embrace those things, the better chance you have of having confidence.
One that I'm going to take, I think somebody said that their goal for starting a business is to be an entrepreneur by way of freelance service. Are these sessions tailored or relevant to that? I think part of the reason that we asked, I think actually the second half of people that registered for today, what kind of business are you trying to start? If we see success with these first 3 sessions, we're actually talking about bringing in other partners that may be able to address questions like that. So thanks for that question, Chris, and please keep following the sessions that are coming up.
Yeah.
Matt,
I do think, like today, I think hopefully it's open enough and broad enough as we get into our methodology for starting a company. I think some of the things like market validation, for instance, that we'll talk about, or the market validation things that we talk about, I think are going to be very relevant in terms of the process that we go through in order to do that. So what kind of freelance service are you creating? What's the competition look like? What's their rates? How do they get through distribution? What platforms are they associated to? Are they the Upworks, the Fivers, the Dribbles in order to provide those services? What networks can you create in order to help you with sales and distribution? And like I said, you have to worry about everything. I think one of my favorite business cards was the franchisee of Raising Cane's here in the state of Ohio and in here. And his business card says, I'm the fry cook, the operator, the cashier, and owner. And that's essentially what an entrepreneur is. You're everything to everyone. And so you have to learn all of these skills and how you bill and what services you use in order to be that freelance. So, and we will reference tools that help you with that. If you are freelance, there's a company called Rome HR that helps freelancers and gig economy workers kind of manage their taxes and get benefit services as part of being an entrepreneurial community. So hopefully we can be helpful to you in that regard, but the intent is to try to be as helpful, as broad as we can.
And let's do one more question. I think hopefully serves as a little bit of a preview for next week for validation. How do you tell the difference between realistic data saying to stop versus, quote, relentless persistence?
I think it's, again, I'm from a technology background. The data side of things is when we saw our monthly active users drop down right after the spring and we went through 2 seasons, we saw that. On the validation side, you've got to set a realistic goal. If only 3 people out of 10 say you got a really interesting idea, that can weigh very heavily on the data that you have. If you're not getting renewal contracts on a short-term basis, there's something to be said about that. So constantly look for feedback loops, survey your customers, get the feedback that says, would you hire me? Would you refer me to someone else? So that net promoter score is always a big indicator. And that's a simple one by sending, I have a past customer who's looking at using me again, and would you refer me to someone else? That's a huge indicator on whether your service is of value and whether you're going to be successful or not. So just a few examples.
Great. Well, Matt, thank you.
I thank everybody for attending. Hopefully we see you all next Thursday. Appreciate your time and best of luck.